Hello everyone, this is Ken Jobst, and it's my pleasure to join you in Pursuing Gold. It's Men's Month at St. Stephen Church, and this month we're going to be diving into a series that's entitled Four Kings, How Character Shapes Leadership. Now, if you're a card player and you're dealt a hand where you have four kings, that's a pretty hard to beat hand. I'm not saying it can't be beat, but I'm saying you've got a pretty strong hand when you've got four kings. Our series, Four Kings, How Character Shapes Leadership, is drawn from the Bible, the book of 2 Chronicles in the Old Testament. Now, let me just give a quick update for us so we understand how 2 Chronicles fits in to the Bible story. Following the reign of King Solomon, in the Old Testament, remember, there was the United Kingdom, and it had King Saul, who was followed by King David, who was followed by King Solomon. That was the limit of the United Kingdom. After King Solomon, the nation divided in two. There was a northern kingdom, which was called Israel, and it was comprised of 10 tribes, and there was a southern kingdom comprised of 2 tribes, that was called Judah. The northern kingdom of Israel had 19 kings during the time of the northern kingdom. 19 kings. And those 19 kings all did evil in the eyes of the Lord. In the southern kingdom of Judah, there were 20 kings, but only 8 of the 20 kings did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. So in this study, we're going to take a look at some of those kings and how their character shaped leadership. Now, also, just by way of preview, even though those 8 kings of Judah that are listed in 2 Chronicles, even though those 8 kings did right in the eyes of the Lord, still, each of them had a major character flaw that kept them from finishing well. You know what? You can run an amazing race. You can run a strong race. Let's say you're going to run a mile. You're going to run 4 times around the track. You can lead 3.5 laps. And still, if you stumble before the finish line, you're not going to win, right? So it's one of those things. Nobody cares who leads in the first 3 quarters of a football game. It's who leads when the game is over, right? So today we're going to jump in and we're going to look at the first of our 4 kings, and this is King Jehoshaphat. And we're going to be studying King Jehoshaphat and the character issue of facing compromises. Now, if you'd like to review the entire story of King Jehoshaphat, I encourage you to take a look at 2 Chronicles chapter 17 through 20. You'll get the whole story of King Jehoshaphat. But I'm going to lift up selected verses for us to take a look at today. From 2 Chronicles chapter 17, verses 1 through 13. Then Jehoshaphat, his son, reigned in his place and strengthened himself against Israel. And he placed troops in all the fortified cities of Judah and set garrisons in the land of Judah and in the cities of Ephraim, which Asa his father had taken. Now, the Lord was with Jehoshaphat, because he walked in the former ways of his father David. He did not seek the Baals, but sought the God of his father, and walked in his commandments, not according to the acts of Israel. Therefore, the Lord established the kingdom in his hand, and all Judah gave presents to Jehoshaphat, and he had riches and honor in abundance. And his heart took delight in the ways of the Lord. Moreover, he removed the high places and wooden images from Judah. Also, in the 3rd year of his reign, he sent his leaders, Ben-Hail, Obadiah, Zechariah, Nethanel, and Micaiah, to teach in the cities of Judah. And with him he sent Levites, Shemaiah, Nethaniah, Zebadiah, Ashel, Shemiramoth, Jehonathan, Adonijah, Tobijah, Toba-Adonijah, the Levites, and with them Elishama and Jehoram the priests. So they taught in Judah and had the book of the law of the Lord with them. They went throughout all the cities of Judah and taught the people. And the fear of the Lord fell on all the kingdoms of the lands that were around Judah, so that they did not make war on Jehoshaphat. Also, some of the Philistines brought Jehoshaphat presents and silver as tribute, and the Arabians brought him flocks, 7,700 rams, 7,700 male goats. So, Jehoshaphat became increasingly powerful, and he built fortresses and storage cities in Judah. He had much property in the cities of Judah, and men of war, mighty men of valor, were in Jerusalem. So let's pause right there. We've taken a look at the Jehoshaphat, and we see two things right off the bat. We see that Jehoshaphat, first of all, was right in the sight of the Lord. And look, this breaks down into the circumstances and the consequences. The circumstances of being right with the Lord and the consequences to being right with the Lord. First of all, look at the circumstances. In verse 4, we find that he sought the God of his father. Seek and you will find, ask and it will be given unto you. Knock and the door will be opened, Jesus says. So he sought the God of his father. He walked in his commandments. That is, he actually did. He was not just a person of words or thoughts or intention, but he was a person of action. And then third, verse 6 tells us he had a heart for the Lord. At the core of who he was, he honored and worshiped and glorified God. Now, the consequences of those circumstances were these. Verse 5 tells us his kingdom was established. There was nothing raggedy about his kingdom. His kingdom was established. Verse 5 also tells us that he had riches and honor in abundance. And then verses 12 through 13 describe that he becomes increasingly powerful and that he had much property. All of this because he had a heart for the Lord, he sought the God of his father, and he walked in his commandments. Which is to say, he did right and he looked to do right because he had a heart for the Lord. So Jehoshaphat was right with the Lord, but then Jehoshaphat was also right with the people. And as we took a look in verses 7 through 9, as I stumbled through those Hebraic names that are tongue twisters in the best of circumstances, we see that the one thing that Jehoshaphat did was that he taught the people. He made provisions so that all of the people of Judah would be taught the law of the Lord. That's a wonderful thing. And that's something that, once again, made him right with God and right with the people. If you take a look in chapter 19, reading in your leisure, you'll see how Jehoshaphat brought about judicial reform as well. So he brought about reform in the process of settling disputes among the people. All of this to say that Jehoshaphat was right in the sight of the Lord, and he was right with the people. Wow, who could ask for more? He's right with God, he's right with the people. What else could you imagine? Well, here's Jehoshaphat's character flaw. Jehoshaphat's character flaw was compromise. Come along with me as we read 2 Chronicles chapter 18, verse 1. Just this one little verse from 2 Chronicles chapter 18. Jehoshaphat had riches and honor in abundance, and by marriage he allied himself with Ahab. Let's pause right there. By marriage he allied himself with Ahab. Ahab being the king, the wicked king, the evil king of the northern kingdom of Israel. Remember, the northern kingdom never had anything but wicked and evil kings. Now, let me ask a question right here. And we'll have time in a little while to reflect and discuss this question. But when is compromise acceptable or even desirable? I'm saying that Jehoshaphat had a character flaw here because he compromised, and that he compromised in marrying into the family of wicked King Ahab. Well, compromise in the service of a higher shared value is certainly admirable. When two parties share a high value, compromise is great. However, compromise is a character flaw when it involves a moral compromise, which was certainly the case in the marriage alliance that Jehoshaphat made with the northern kingdom's King Ahab. So how costly was this compromise? At your leisure, you can take a look as we see as you read through 2 Chronicles. But to summarize, the marriage alliance with Israel had some potential upsides, right? And the upsides were these. There was a political upside. Imagine, remember, the kingdom had been united under Saul, David, and Solomon. Perhaps Jehoshaphat was thinking that the political alliance would bring these two nations back together, perhaps reunite the divided kingdom. Of course, in addition to the political advantage, the potential political advantage, there would be a potential military advantage. That is, rather than going out to face an enemy with only your troops, the two nations militarily could have been stronger together. The third advantage to a compromise might have been, or a third advantage to an alliance based on marriage, could have been economic. In addition to the political advantages and the military advantages, there might have been an economic advantage in increasing trade and opening new markets for both companies. So there were some upsides to a potential marital alliance with Israel. But what's the major drawback? The deal breaker was this, that these were two nations that were spiritually mismatched. In the New Testament, we would have called them unequally yoked. Well, what happened? The marriage went forward. And as it turns out, Jehoshaphat's son, Jehoram, married a woman named Athaliah, who was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. Remember that name. Athaliah. Athaliah had evil parents. And Athaliah, it turns out, is going to be an evil daughter who now marries into the bloodline of Judah, the leadership of Judah. So how bad was this alliance? This alliance was so bad, watch, Athaliah tried to kill all of the descendants that would have been in the Davidic dynasty. So Athaliah tried to kill all of the princes so there would no longer be a Davidic line in the kingship of Judah. To put that another way, Athaliah, I would have to say satanically motivated, Athaliah attempted to interrupt the bloodline between David and Jesus. Now, what's the cost of a moral compromise? There's the cost of the moral compromise. Let me lift up another passage. This is from 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verses 31 through 37. We're talking about how moral compromise impacted one of the good kings of Judah, King Jehoshaphat. 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verses 31 through 37 reads, "So Jehoshaphat was king over Judah. He was 35 years old when he became king, and he reigned 25 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Azubah, the daughter of Shilhi, and he walked in the way of his father Asa. He did not turn aside from it, doing what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away, for as yet the people had not directed their hearts to the God of their fathers." Now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat, first and last, indeed, they are written in the book of Jehu, the son of Hanani, which is mentioned in the book of the kings of Israel. Verse 35. After this, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, allied himself with Ahaziah, king of Israel, who acted very wickedly. Okay, just so we're all keeping up, right? Jehoshaphat allied himself with, Ahab, who was the wicked king of the northern kingdom, wicked king of Israel. He allied himself in a marriage alliance with that king. Then now, with this later king, once again, he makes another alliance. He makes another moral compromise in establishing an alliance with the unbelieving, wicked king of the northern kingdom. After this, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, I'm in verse 35, allied himself with King Ahaziah, king of Israel, who acted very wickedly. And he allied himself with him to make ships to go to Tarshish. And they made the ships at Ezion-Geber. But Eliezer, son of Davidah of Mareshah, prophesied against Jehoshaphat, saying, "Because you have allied yourself with Ahaziah, the Lord has destroyed your works." Then the ships were wrecked, so they were not able to go to Tarshish. Wow. By the way, Tarshish, you may recognize the name Tarshish from the book of Jonah. Jonah was told to go to Nineveh. Instead, he went down to Joppa, got in a boat to go to Tarshish. Tarshish was at the westernmost edge of the Mediterranean Sea. Tarshish was basically Spain, what we know as Spain today. And so Jehoshaphat had planned to ally himself with the northern kingdom, with Ahaziah, a wicked king, to build a navy or to build a merchant marine. And they were going to sail these ships to Tarshish and back and make a lot of money. Now watch. Where Jerusalem was situated, where Israel is situated, was in between three continents, in between Africa, Asia, and Europe. And the trade routes that went through that part of the world were extremely valuable. So Jehoshaphat, who we've already established, was tremendously powerful and had much property, made an unwise investment. Let me say that again. Compromised himself by making an unwise investment with somebody who was a dirty dealer, right? A wicked king of Israel. And because he did that, the ships were wrecked. The Lord destroyed his works. Now, mercy. We're talking about a good king. We're talking about King Jehoshaphat, who walked in the ways of the Lord. And as I mentioned at the top of this video, there were only 8 of 20 kings of Judah who could be described as good, who walked in the ways of the Lord. But for each of those 8, each of them had some sort of character flaw that did not allow them to finish well. Finishing well is important. Maintaining one's integrity is tremendously important, and especially in the realm of leadership. Now, let's share just a few questions for reflection and discussion. And these will be in your lesson, but I'd like to lift them up just now for our consideration. The first question for reflection and discussion is this one. Do you know a situation where a generally good person with good intentions made a compromise that resulted in disaster? And I'm talking about anybody, right? I'm talking about a good person with good intentions. They set out to do something, but they made a compromise, a moral compromise that resulted in disaster for their project or whatever it was. And, ponder that for a minute. And that might be well worth discussing as a part of the lesson today. Secondly, let's reflect and ask this question of ourselves. In what area of your life are you the most vulnerable to moral compromise? In what area of your life are you most vulnerable to a compromise that could wreck everything? Might be in an economic realm, might be in a relationship realm. It could be any of a number of things, because those compromises, they pop up when we're not expecting them. So, what steps are you taking to ensure that you don't end up shipwrecked like Jehoshaphat? There's some things that we might want to consider, in terms of accountability structures and so on and so forth. Now, Jehoshaphat's final compromise that 2 Chronicles tells us about is that alliance that he made with Ahaziah, king of Israel. And once again, just to drive this home, their plan was to build a fleet of ships that would sail the Mediterranean Sea. They were venture capitalists, right? But their venture ended in shipwreck. Now, let me just ask you this question. How is shipwreck a fitting metaphor for the perils of making moral compromises? How is shipwreck a fitting picture, a fitting metaphor for the perils of making moral compromises? Remember, when you're on a ship, you're out there in the ocean. And I don't know how long you can tread water. And I don't know how far I can swim. So there comes some things that we come to rely on. And our character is the vessel that's going to be able to carry us through calm seas or rough seas, as long as we are true to what it is that God is calling us to. You know, I heard a movie director one time describing what it was that he did for a living in making motion pictures. And he said the biggest challenge in making a movie is that every morning when you get up, before you wake, there's the compromise truck. And the compromise truck parks right outside your house and starts unloading compromises for you that day. Your job to be successful is to not pick up the compromises that the compromise truck puts in your path. And instead, stay true. Stay true to what the Lord has placed in your heart. So I'd like to thank Pursuing Gold at this time for this opportunity to present this series, 4 Kings, How Character Shapes Leadership. So this time we're considering Jehoshaphat. We'll give you a little while to discuss and talk about Jehoshaphat and what we've learned from the compromises that he made. And I want to give you just a little preview next week. Next time we're going to be talking about King Joash. King Joash. So once again, this is Ken Jobst from St. Stephen Church in Louisville, Kentucky with the Pursuing Gold class. Have a great lesson. God bless you. I'll pick it up next week. See you then. Bye-bye.